Now let's move to Gaza, Vanessa, and we'll just start off with this tweet here, because this is Anneliese Dodds, who's the Minister for International Development, and tweeting out about this great effort to vaccinate the whole of Gazan society for polio. And I just wanted to bring zoom in on one graphic there. This is an oral vaccine. So undoubtedly you've got something to say about this.
Yes, well, I'll start off with the Journal of Infectious Diseases. With prolonged replication, attenuated polioviruses use in the oral polio vaccine can mutate into what is called vaccine-derived poliovirus. So I'll just start with that. And as I said, that's from the Journal of Infectious Diseases. The WHO is effectively the organization which has identified one case of paralysis in a child in Gaza, and is now asking for a humanitarian pause from Israel to enable the entry of 1 million oral polio virus vaccines. And that campaign will be made up of two stages, the first vaccine and the second. This is Ahmed Al-Rahman, sorry, the name escaped me for a second, who's the child that has been claimed has contracted polio virus. But remember that that virus could easily be already present from the previous oral vaccine campaigns in Gaza, bearing in mind the appalling conditions, immunosuppressant conditions that these people are living in: poor sanitation, trauma, lack of food, lack of water, lack of anything, pretty much. And of course, that's a deliberate campaign by Israel, and this was back in November 2023. Of course, there have been other very similar statements. Former Israel general says severe epidemics, in Gaza would help Israel win the war. So is this a vaccine campaign, or is this biowarfare by the Zionists against Palestinians? And of course, when we look at the deliberate destruction of the majority of the water and sewage system since October the 7th, deadly disease ripping through Gaza after the destruction of the water and sewage systems. And there's a very long and detailed report from Oxfam, Water War Crimes, how Israel has weaponized water in its military campaign in Gaza. And of course, we shouldn't forget that Israel has been deliberately targeting children, more than 17,000. We know these numbers are very low estimates. Children have been killed in some of the cruelest and most savage ways possible. So why now a so-called humanitarian pause? And here, of course, is Bill Gates, one of the originators of the oral polio vaccine and responsible for much else, as we know, with Israel's Netanyahu. And then this is from the Children's Health Defense, which, of course, Robert Kennedy Jr. was formerly with. I think, Mike, you told me that he had now left. But, of course, the irony is that he is a supporter, or rather a denier, of Israel's genocide against Palestinians. But in this article, they talk about the polio vaccination still causing polio after all these years. So what do they actually say? So the oral polio vaccine is in use around the world and constitutes the so-called workhorse of global polio eradication efforts due to its low cost and ease of administration. The OPV contains live but weakened polio viruses that match up to wild polio viruses. Vaccine researchers have long known that these OPV-derived viruses can themselves cause polio, particularly when they get loose in the environment in settings with poor sanitation. And as I've mentioned, in Gaza, you can't get much poorer. Iffy hygiene. The vaccine viruses can easily find their way into the water sources or into the sewage and onto contaminated hands or food, where they can then launch a self-perpetuating chain of transmission. Researchers concede that an OPV virus can very rapidly regain its strength if it starts spreading on its own, acquiring mutations that make it basically indistinguishable from the wild-type virus. In other words, there is no meaningful difference between a wild and OPV-derived poliovirus in terms of virulence, and in terms of how the virus spreads. And I remind people again that Israel has no humanitarian reflex towards Palestinians whatsoever. And from the Substack of journalist Sam Husseini, he points out the fact that some have argued that Israel's goal is to ensure that there is not a polio outbreak in Gaza, since that might threaten Israel itself. It's an example of enlightened self-interest. However, this reasoning might be undermined, I believe it is, by the fact that Israel has been giving its soldiers a polio vaccine, and they have been giving them the IPV vaccine, not the oral one given to Palestinians. This would indicate that they would be immune to it, and Israel may effectively come off unscathed from a polio outbreak among the Palestinians. Also, IPV deals with all three types of polio. In 2022, Israel had cases of polio, and the reports IPA and OPV were used. Now, it's interesting to note that, for example, in countries equally with very poor sanitation conditions like the Congo, like Yemen during the war, there are cases of vaccine-derived polio outbreaks. And while the WHO was carrying out an oral polio vaccine campaign in Pakistan back in 2013, 2012, there were mercenaries coming into Syria from Pakistan that were fighting alongside al-Qaeda in Syria to topple the Syrian government. And there was effectively an outbreak of polio at that point, vaccine-derived polio in Syria. I remember these reports, as probably you do, Mike. And in fact, the Syrian government accused the WHO of importing polio back into Syria because in Syria it had been eradicated in 1999. And then basically, even among the Gazans themselves, there is a huge distrust about Israel's motives in allowing the vaccines right now. And this, there's a couple of clips from Gaza journalist Bisan Alda, who's been reporting on the genocide since October the 7th, and herself is suffering with one of the multiple skin diseases that are now rampant in Gaza because of the conditions. So let's play the first video.
This guy, anonymous, I don't know who is this guy, sent me this email. And Allah yarda alayh, he made me ask a lot of questions. I mean, do really the occupation who killed 17,000 children, who cut them into pieces, killed them in brutal ways in front of their parents, or maybe let them bleed under rubble for hours before passing away, cares about saving the lives of children in Gaza? The same occupation criminals, genocidal army, who are now putting all these children in tents in horrific conditions, health conditions, let them die, literally die because of starvation, die because of the skin infections and because of the fever, because of everything. And then now they care about the vaccine, the polio virus vaccine. Why?
Very good questions. And in fact, one of the points that I thought about afterwards as well is, of course, the vaccine centers that she will now describe will lead to the influx of crowds of some of the youngest generation in Gaza. Of course, 50% of the population is under the age of 18. So is this Israel basically targeting the next generation of Palestinians, as they have been doing since October the 7th, with the majority of their targets having been children? So let's just see how she talks about this.
Is that there is no such thing as a truce or a humanitarian truce. It's only in the hospitals, the field hospitals, or the medical clinics or points, field points, that will give the vaccine for the children. So a kid or a parent, okay, can be killed while going to have the vaccine or getting back from having the vaccine to their tents or their displacement camp.
And actually, sadly, this is exactly what happened yesterday. The Al Fakhura school, which was one of the vaccine administration centers, was bombed, leading to multiple casualties. So it appears that, the fears about the introduction of biowarfare and also the gathering together of targets for Israel to be able to slaughter them en masse.
Thanks very much, Vanessa. And it does seem an extraordinary intervention until one considers who might benefit or who stands to benefit the most from it. But certainly it's not